Hi, leave the house keys, take your suitcase, and don't come back, my son Gregory said over dinner, while Stacy, his wife, nodded coldly. My grandson handed me a packed suitcase. I built that house for them, yet they erased me like dust. But when the bank called, naming me the sole owner, their world began to crumble. I'm not just coming back, I'll make them regret it. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The rain tapped the dining room windows as I sat at the head of the oak table Ellen and I chose 30 years ago. My plate was untouched. Gregory, my son, leaned forward, his chair creaking. Stacy, his wife, sipped her wine, the glass clinking against her teeth. Their faces were sharp in the warm light, and I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Dad, we've been thinking, Gregory started, his voice too casual, like he was discussing the weather. You're not getting younger. A nursing home might be best. I blinked, fork hovering over my plate. A nursing home? Gregory, I'm 63, not 90. I built this house. My voice was steady, but my pulse wasn't. The family photos on the wall, Ellen smiling, Tommy as a toddler, seemed to watch, waiting. Stacy set her glass down, her necklace glinting as she twirled it. We found a lovely facility, Norman, she said, her tone smooth as silk, but cold. It's perfect for you. Quiet, comfortable. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I gripped the tablecloth, its texture rough under my fingers. This is my home, I said, locking eyes with Gregory. You live under my roof. I paid for your education, your wedding, your startup. The words spilled out, each one heavier than the last. Gregory's face reddened. He slammed his glass down, wine sloshing onto the table. You're holding us back, Dad, he snapped. We need space, a fresh start. You're a burden. The word hit like a slap. Stacy nodded, her silence sharper than any insult. I turned to Tommy, my grandson, sitting quietly at the table's edge. His eyes were fixed on his plate, his small hands fidgeting. Tommy, I said softly, you understand, don't you? He didn't look up. Instead, he slid a suitcase across the floor, its wheels squeaking. Here, Grandpa, he whispered, barely audible. My throat tightened. The suitcase was mine, packed, ready. They'd planned this. I stood, chair scraping against the hardwood. You can't do this, I said, my voice low but firm. I own this house. Legally, it's mine. Gregory stood too, towering over the table. Leave the house keys, take your suitcase, and don't come back, he said, his voice cold, final. Stacy's lips curved, a faint, satisfied smirk. I looked at them, my son and his wife, and saw strangers. I wanted to shout, to fight, but Tommy's downcast eyes stopped me. I wouldn't make a scene in front of him. My hand shook as I reached for the keys in my pocket. They felt heavy, like they carried the weight of every memory in this house. Ellen's laughter, Tommy's first steps. I set them on the table, their metallic clink echoing like a door slamming shut. Fine, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I grabbed the suitcase handle, its leather cool against my palm, and walked to the door. The rain was louder now, a steady drumbeat. I glanced back, catching Ellen's framed smile on the wall. She'd know what to do, I thought. She always did. I stepped outside, the door closing behind me with a soft thud. The evening air was cool, carrying the faint scent of wet grass that enveloped me. My breath caught as I stood on the porch, the suitcase heavy in my hand. The street was dark, the neighborhood's tidy lawns and glowing windows mocking my displacement. I was erased, like dust swept from their perfect lives. Then headlights cut through the rain, a taxi slowing at the curb. Its yellow glow was faint, but it was something. I tightened my grip on the suitcase and stepped forward, the wet pavement slick under my shoes. The evening breeze cut through my coat, the suitcase heavy in my hand. I waved down a taxi, slid inside, and caught the scent of coffee. Where to? The driver asked, his voice gravelly but kind. He was about 50, with a weathered cap and eyes that caught mine in the rearview mirror. Harbor Motel, I muttered, naming the only place I could think of. It's off Post Road. My voice sounded hollow, unfamiliar. I set the suitcase on my lap, its zipper digging into my palms. The driver, Ray, his license read, nodded and pulled onto the street. The taxi's heater hummed, warming my chilled hands, but it couldn't touch the cold inside me. Rain streaked the windows, and the suburban homes we passed glowed with a warmth I no longer had. I gave them everything, I thought, my mind replaying Gregory's words. You're a burden. You all right back there? Ray asked, glancing at me in the mirror. His tone wasn't prying, just concerned, like he'd seen men like me before. I didn't answer right away. My fingers traced the suitcase's handle, its worn leather grounding me. Not really, I admitted, my voice cracking. My son, he kicked me out, told me to leave my own house. Ray let out a low whistle. That's rough. Family can cut deepest. He adjusted the mirror, his eyes steady. Want to talk about it? I hesitated. The rain's rhythm filled the silence. Then it spilled out. We were having dinner, I said, my words halting. Gregory, my son, said I should go to a nursing home. His wife, Stacy, backed him up, cold as ice. They'd packed my suitcase, even got my grandson to hand it to me. My throat tightened at the memory of Tommy's whisper, Here, Grandpa. Ray shook his head, his hands steady on the wheel. That's a low blow, using the kid. He paused, then added, Sounds like they're after something. Money? The house? I nodded, staring at the rain. The house. I built it for them, for Ellen. My wife? She's gone now, but I kept it for the family. Paid for Gregory's education, his wedding, his failing startup. A memory flashed. Late nights at the kitchen table, helping Gregory draft his business plan. My coffee going cold. I'd sold my car to fund his dreams. Sounds like you gave too much, Ray said, his voice soft but firm. I've been there. My brother tried to push me out of our family shop, thought I was too old to run it. He chuckled, but it was bittersweet. I fought back, kept what was mine. How? I asked, leaning forward. The suitcase slid slightly, its weight a reminder of my uprooted life. Got help, Ray said. A guy who knows the law, fights for folks like us. He reached into the glove box, pulling out a business card. James Cook, advocate, help me keep my shop. Might help you with that house. He handed me the card, its edges worn but sturdy. I took it, the paper warm from his hand. Thanks, I said, tucking it into my pocket. My fingers brushed the damp fabric of my coat, and I felt a spark, faint but real. Fight back. The words echoed, mingling with the rain's patter. We passed a house with a swing set, lit by a streetlight. It reminded me of Tommy's childhood, the backyard playset I'd built with my own hands. I'd funded his world, and now his parents had torn mine apart. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Fight my own son. Ray glanced back, his eyes kind but unyielding. You're strong, Norman, but too kind. Sometimes you fight, even family. You don't have to take this. He paused, then grinned. Tell you what, you get that house back. You owe me a beer. I managed a small laugh, the first in hours. Deal, I said, the word feeling like a promise. The motel's neon sign loomed ahead, its red glow flickering through the rain. Ray pulled up to the curb, refusing my attempt to pay. This one's on me, he said. Call James. He'll set you right. I stepped out, the evening air cooling my face. I pulled the suitcase toward the motel's entrance, its glass door reflecting the dim glow of a street lamp. I clutched Ray's card in my pocket, its edges sharp against my fingers. For the first time that night, I felt something solid under me, like ground after a fall. I turned toward the door and walked forward. The taxi pulled up to the Harbor Motel, its neon sign flickering in the rain, casting red reflections on the wet pavement. I thanked Ray, stepped out, and my footsteps echoed as I dragged the suitcase to the entrance. The wind drove rain into my face, but I felt resolve growing inside me, solid as the ground beneath my feet. The motel clerk barely looked up as he slid a keycard across the counter, his indifference a mirror to the hollow ache in my chest. I mumbled a thanks, grabbed my suitcase, and headed down the dim hallway. The door to room 12 beeped, unnaturally loud in the silent corridor, and I stepped inside. The air smelled of musty carpet and stale air freshener. A lumpy bed sat against faded wallpaper, and outside, a neon sign buzzed, casting red shadows across the room. I dropped the suitcase, its thud echoing my displacement, and surveyed the space. This wasn't home. I unzipped the bag, my hands moving on autopilot. In a side pocket, I found it. A small framed photo of Ellen, her smile warm against the cold glass. My breath caught. I set it on the nightstand, the wood scratched but sturdy, and sank onto the bed. You'd know what to do, wouldn't you? I whispered, tracing her face with my thumb. The photo's worn edges felt like a lifeline. The room was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. I leaned back, the headboard creaking, and let my mind wander. I saw us, Ellen and me, 30 years ago, picking out the oak table for our new home. We'd built that house together, every nail and shingle a promise to our family. Gregory was just a boy then, his laughter filling the garden. I'd skipped vacations, sold stocks, poured everything into his dreams. His degree, his wedding, that startup he swore would change the world. How did it come to this? The neon's hum filled the silence, relentless. I stood pacing the small room, my shoes scuffing the carpet. The faded curtains caught my eye, their floral pattern a ghost of the drapes Ellen sewed for our dining room. I could see her now, needle in hand, humming softly as she worked. For our home, she'd said, her eyes bright. That home was mine. Legally, morally. Gregory's words, "You're a burden," burned in my mind, each syllable a betrayal. I sat back down, facing Ellen's photo. "How did I let this happen?" I asked, my voice rough. "I trusted him. I thought he'd learned from you." My fingers tightened around the frame, the glass cool against my skin. I remembered Gregory's startup pitches, how I'd stayed up late, tweaking his numbers, believing in him, and Stacy always in the background, her eyes calculating, pushing him further. They'd taken my kindness and twisted it into weakness. The suitcase lay open on the floor, its contents spilling like a wound. I stared at it, anger rising, hot and sharp. "I gave them everything," I said, louder now, as if Ellen could hear, "and they threw me out like trash." The words felt good, like releasing a breath I'd held too long. I thought of Tommy, his reluctant hands pushing the suitcase, his whispered, "Here, Grandpa." He was caught in their web, but maybe not too far gone. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "I won't let them take it all," I told Ellen, my voice steady now. "The house, our memories, my dignity, they don't get to erase me." The neon buzzed, a constant reminder of where I was, but it didn't matter. I had a plan, or at least the start of one. Ray's words echoed. "Sometimes you fight, even family." He was right. I'd been too kind, too trusting, but that ended tonight. I glanced at the nightstand, where Ray's card sat beside Ellen's photo. James Cook, advocate. The name felt like a door cracking open, letting in light. I'd call him in the morning, lay out the facts. The deed in my name, the payments I'd made, the life I'd built. Gregory and Stacy thought they'd won, but they'd underestimated me. I wasn't just a father or a grandfather. I was Norman Green, and I'd fight for what was mine. I lay back on the bed, the mattress sagging under me. The neon's red glow pulsed through the curtains, but my eyes were on the card. Tomorrow, I'd start. Tomorrow, I'd take the first step. For Ellen, for Tommy, for me. I closed my eyes, the buzz fading as resolve settled in, solid as the ground beneath me. Morning brought faint light through the motel's curtains, and I knew I couldn't sit still any longer. Ray's card lay on the nightstand, James Cook's name calling me to action. I dialed his number, arranging to meet at a cafe on Elm Street, a few blocks from the motel. Grabbing my coat, I stepped into the drizzle, my steps quickening with every thought of the home I had to reclaim. The drizzle coated Westport streets in a soft sheen as I pushed open the cafe door, the bell jangling above me. The aroma of fresh coffee hit me, warm and grounding, a stark contrast to the motel's stale air. Wooden tables were scattered across the room, each holding a couple or a lone reader, their murmurs blending with the hiss of the espresso machine. Large windows framed a gray spring morning, passers-by huddled under umbrellas. I scanned the room, my fingers tightening around James Cook's card, still crisp from Ray's taxi. There he was, in the corner, papers spread across a table, his suit sharp, but his posture relaxed. I adjusted my glasses, nerves prickling my skin, and crossed the cafe. The suitcase was back at the motel, but its weight lingered in my mind, a reminder of what I'd lost. "James?" I said, my voice quieter than I meant. He looked up, his eyes keen but kind, and stood, extending a hand. "Norman Green," he said, his grip firm. "Good to meet you. Ray spoke highly of you." His voice had a steady cadence, like a man used to cutting through chaos. I sat, the chair creaking, and set my coffee mug down, its steam curling upward. The table's surface was worn, etched with faint rings from countless cups. and I traced one with my thumb, steadying myself. I don't know where to start, I admitted, my words halting. My son, Gregory, kicked me out of my own house. His wife, Stacy, was in on it. They packed my suitcase, told me to leave the keys. My voice tightened, the memory of the keys' clink still raw. James leaned forward, his pen tapping the table, his face unreadable but attentive. Tell me everything, he said, his tone low. Urgent. Don't leave anything out. I took a breath, the coffee's bitterness sharp on my tongue. It was over dinner, I said. Gregory said I was a burden, that I should go to a nursing home. Stacy backed him up, all smiles and venom. My grandson Tommy handed me the suitcase. I built that house for them, James. Paid for Gregory's education, his wedding, his startup, everything. A memory flashed, late nights at my desk, balancing Gregory's startup budget, my eyes burning from the screen. I'd given up my retirement for his dreams. James's pen froze mid-note. Your own son? He muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. That's beyond low. He leaned back, his chair scraping softly, and shook his head. I've seen greed, Norman, but this? This is personal. His words carried the weight of a father, not just an advocate, and I felt a flicker of hope. They think they've won, I said, my fingers tightening around the mug, but the house is in my name. Legally, it's mine. I paused, then added, I want it back, and I want them to understand what they've done. James's eyes narrowed, a spark of righteous anger in them. We'll get your house, he said, his voice firm. But we can do more. Gregory's startup. Ray mentioned it's shaky. You know his business, don't you? His weaknesses? He slid a legal pad across the table, its crisp lines a promise of structure in my unraveling world. I nodded, my mind racing. He's always been sloppy with money, I said. Overpromises to investors. Underdelivers on results. I bailed him out more times than I can count. The cafe's chalkboard menu caught my eye, its neat handwriting reminding me of Gregory's startup pitch. Scrawled on a napkin, my savings poured into his vision. Then we start there, James said, jotting notes. We'll check property records, confirm your ownership, but we'll also look at his business. Financial pressure can make people like Gregory crack. He tapped his pen, a rhythmic beat. This isn't just about reclaiming your home, Norman. It's about teaching them a lesson they won't forget. I leaned forward, the table's edge pressing into my palms. What's the first step? I asked, my voice steadier now. The cafe's warmth wrapped around me, a small comfort against the storm outside. We gather evidence, James said. Deeds, bank records. Anything showing your contributions to that house and his business. You're not just a father. You're a stakeholder. We'll build a case they can't ignore. He paused, his eyes locking with mine. You ready to fight, Norman? I thought of Ellen's photo on the motel nightstand, her smile urging me forward. I'm ready, I said, my voice solid like the ground I was reclaiming. We shook hands, his grip a seal on our alliance. The espresso machine hissed, punctuating the moment, and I felt something shift inside me. A spark of the man I'd been before betrayal dimmed me. James gathered his papers, sliding them into a folder. I'll start digging today, he said. You focus on what you know about Gregory's business. Every detail helps. He handed me his card, its embossed letters catching the light. Call me any time. I stood, the chair scraping softly, and tucked the card into my pocket. The cafe's bustle faded as I stepped outside, the drizzle cool on my face. I pulled my coat tighter, my eyes catching a street sign. Elm Street, just blocks from my old home. The name hit me like a pulse, stirring memories of Ellen's garden, Tommy's laughter. My hand brushed my phone, a new resolve hardening in me. I turned down the sidewalk, the sign's arrow pointing me forward. The drizzle had eased as I walked back to the motel, my mind buzzing with James's plan. The folder with his card sat in my pocket, but the real weapon was in my head. Knowledge of Gregory's weaknesses. The motel would give me focus, away from the cafe's hum. Reaching my room, I tossed my coat on the bed, sat at the desk, and pulled out my phone, ready to strike at Gregory's business. The motel room's lamp flickered, casting jagged shadows on the wall as I sat at the desk, paper spread before me like a battle map. The spring breeze slipped through the cracked window, carrying the faint scent of blooming lilacs, a cruel reminder of the garden I'd lost. It was late afternoon, the golden light slicing through the drizzle outside, and James's words echoed in my mind. Financial pressure can make people like Gregory crack. My old contacts from my consulting days lay scribbled on a notepad, their names a lifeline to my past. I picked up my phone, its cool plastic steadying my nerves, and dialed the first investor. Norman Green, I said when the call connected, my voice calm but firm. I'm calling about Gregory Green's startup. The investor, a man I'd advised years ago, sounded surprised but warm. I took a breath, the desk's chipped edge rough under my fingers. I have reason to believe Gregory's misusing funds, overpromising, under-delivering. You might want to look into it. My words were measured, professional, but each one felt like a jab. The investor's tone shifted, shock creeping in. Misused funds? We trusted him because of you, Norman. His voice crackled through the phone, and I felt a surge of satisfaction. I'll have my team review the books, he promised before hanging up. I jotted a note, Investor 1, investigating, and leaned back, the chair creaking. One down. I paced the room, the carpet muffling my steps, and dialed the next number. The suitcase sat open by the bed, its contents untouched since last night, a silent witness to my uprooted life. Each call grew easier, my voice steadier, my old expertise resurfacing. I helped to build his business, I told another investor, a woman with a sharp edge. But he's been reckless. Check his expense reports, she gasped, promising a full audit. I marked her name, Investor 2, rattled, and kept going. A memory hit me as I scribbled. Gregory at 25, his startup pitch scrawled on a diner napkin, my pen circling errors. I'd taught him how to balance a ledger, sold stocks to fund his dreams. The pen's scratch on my notepad now felt like a weapon, turning his betrayal back on him. I'd been a fool to trust him, but I wasn't that man anymore. 3 calls in, my hand ached from gripping the phone, but the thrill of action pushed me forward. The investors' reactions, shock, suspicion, urgency, validated me. Gregory's house of cards was wobbling, and I'd barely started. I paused, the motel's silence heavy, and glanced at Ellen's photo on the nightstand. Her smile steadied me, but a flicker of doubt crept in. What if this backfired? What if I hurt Tommy in the crossfire? I shook it off, my fingers tapping the desk. This wasn't about destruction. It was about justice. Gregory and Stacy thought they could erase me, but they'd forgotten who I was. I'd built their world, and I could dismantle it, piece by piece. The lamp's flicker slowed, its light steadying, and I felt a quiet triumph settle in my chest. I made one final call, to a hedge fund manager who'd always respected my advice. Norman, if this is true, we're pulling our funding, he said, his voice grim. I thanked him, hung up, and exhaled, the air heavy with the weight of what I'd done. The investors were circling, and Gregory would feel the squeeze soon. I leaned back, the chair groaning, and stared at my notes, their inked lines a map of my counterattack. The breeze from the window cooled my face, and I felt the motel's walls shrink around me, urging me to keep moving. I'd struck the first blow, and it felt right. Clean, precise, like the consultant I'd been. But the fight was far from over. Stacy's cunning lingered in my mind, a shadow behind Gregory's bluster. She'd have a plan, and I needed to be ready. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. A text from an unknown number glowed on the screen. You'll regret this, Dad. My pulse quickened, my thumb hovering over the message. Gregory knew. The game was on, and I wasn't backing down. I stood, the desk's edge biting into my palm, and stared at the text, its words a challenge I was ready to meet. The motel room's silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the neon sign outside. My phone sat on the desk, its screen still glowing with Gregory's text. You'll regret this, Dad. My hand trembled as I read it again, the words sharp as a blade. I paced the small space, the carpet worn under my shoes, my mind racing. I'd struck first, calling his investors, and now he was hitting back. The suitcase by the bed gaped open, a reminder of how far I'd been pushed. But I wasn't the one running anymore. The phone buzzed again, this time a call. Gregory's name flashed, and my stomach tightened. I took a breath, the air stale, and answered, keeping my voice even. Gregory, I said, my tone flat, like I was discussing the weather. You're destroying everything I built, he shouted, his voice cracking through the speaker. You called my investors, lied about me. You think you can ruin me? His words were frantic, unhinged, but I caught Stacy's shadow in them, her calculated venom shaping his rage. I leaned against the desk, its chipped edge grounding me. I told the truth, I said, calm but firm. You've been reckless with their money. They deserve to know. My pulse hammered, but my voice didn't waver. I'd spent years bailing him out, and now I was done. Truth? Gregory spat. You're a jealous old man, Dad. Stacy's right. You're trying to sabotage us. We're suing you for defamation. And the neighbors? They think you're unhinged. We've told them everything. His words were a jab, meant to wound, but they only sharpened my resolve. I clenched my fist, the phone's plastic cool against my ear. Sue me, I said, my voice low, steady. Spread your rumors. It won't change the fact that the house is mine. You can't erase me, Gregory. I hung up before he could respond, the silence that followed heavy, electric. Stacy's plan was clear now. Defamation, public shame, anything to discredit me. She was the brain, Gregory the blunt force. I grabbed my coat, the motel's walls closing in, and stepped outside. The evening air was cool, the sunset painting the sky in soft pinks. I walked to a nearby park, the damp grass crunching underfoot, needing space to think. Blooming cherry trees lined the path, their petals scattered like confetti, and I remembered planting a garden with Ellen, our hands dirty, our laughter light. That home, those memories, they were worth fighting for. I sat on a bench, the wood cold through my jeans, and replayed Gregory's words. Defamation. Neighbors. Stacy's fingerprints were all over this. Her need for control driving their counterattack. I'd underestimated her, but not anymore. My calls to the investors had rattled them, and this was their desperate flailing. I felt a spark of defiance, hot and sure, burning away my doubt. The park's quiet was broken by a bird's chirp, sharp in the dusk. I pulled out my phone, James's number already dialed. Gregory and Stacy thought they could scare me off, but they'd misjudged me. I'd been too kind for too long, but kindness wasn't weakness. It was strength, and I'd use it to outsmart them. The phone rang, and I straightened, the cherry blossoms swaying above me. James, I said when he answered, my voice steady. They're coming for me. We need to hit back harder. James suggested meeting at his office immediately, his voice calm but urgent over the phone. I stood from the bench, cherry blossoms falling around me, and hurried toward downtown, my steps matching the rhythm of my resolve. James's office was a few blocks away, and I reached it in half an hour, the folder of documents warm in my hand as I pushed open the door. The spring sun poured through the window of James Cook's law office, catching the dust motes that danced above his desk. I stood in the doorway, my phone still warm from Gregory's venomous call, his threats, lawsuits, rumors, echoing in my ears. The office was tidy with shelves of legal books and a worn leather chair that creaked as James gestured for me to sit. The faint scent of ink and old paper grounded me, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling in my mind. I set my hands on the desk, the wood cool under my palms, and took a breath. They're coming for me, James, I said, my voice low but steady. Gregory called last night, ranting about defamation. Stacy's got him spreading lies to the neighbors, saying I'm unstable. My jaw tightened, the memory of his words, "You'll regret this, Dad," burning like a fresh cut. James leaned forward, his chair creaking, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Unstable," he said, his tone sharp with indignation. "They're desperate, Norman. That's what this is." He pulled a file from a stack, its edges crisp, and flipped it open. "Tell me exactly what he said." I recounted the call, my fingers rubbing the pen in my pocket, a nervous tick. "He's threatening to sue," I said. "Said they've got a lawyer, that they'll ruin me. Stacy's behind it. She's the one pulling the strings." I paused, the office's silence heavy, amplifying the weight of their betrayal. "I hit a nerve with those investor calls, didn't I?" James's lips twitched, a grim smile. "You hit more than a nerve," he said, tapping a document in the file. "You shook their foundation, but let's talk about yours." He slid a yellowed paper across the desk, its text dense with legal jargon. "This is the original property agreement for your house, signed by you and Ellen. Sole ownership, in your name. Gregory's got no claim, and he's too sloppy to know it." I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. The document's faded ink was a lifeline, a piece of Ellen's foresight I'd nearly forgotten. Sole ownership, I repeated, my voice catching. A memory flashed. Ellen and I at our kitchen table, signing that agreement. Her hand steady as she said, "This protects us, Norman." I'd trusted her then, and now she was saving me again. "Exactly," James said, his pen pointing at a clause. "They're banking on you folding, but this—" He tapped the paper again. "This says you don't have to. We can countersue for attempted fraud. They tried to push you out of your own home, Norman. That's not just personal. It's illegal." His voice carried a righteous edge, like a father defending his own. I exhaled, the leather chair squeaking as I shifted. "Fraud," I said, testing the word. It fit. Gregory's greed, Stacy's schemes, all laid bare, but a flicker of doubt crept in. What about Tommy, my grandson? He's caught in this. I don't want him hurt. My fingers tightened around the pen, its ridges biting into my skin. James's expression softened, but his voice stayed firm. "We'll protect Tommy," he said. "This isn't about him. It's about holding his parents accountable. But we need to move fast. Their lawsuit's a bluff, but it'll cost you time and money if we don't shut it down." He leaned back, his eyes locking with mine. "You've got another angle, don't you? Something you're not telling me." I hesitated, the office's sunlight warm on my face. He was right. I had a plan, a way to tighten the screws on Gregory's business. But it was risky, and I wasn't ready to share it. "Let's start with the countersuit," I said, dodging his question. "But I know Gregory's weak spots. His startup's bleeding money, and I can push harder." My voice was steady, but my mind raced, plotting moves I'd keep close for now. James nodded, jotting a note. "Good," he said. "We'll file the countersuit today, demand they back off. You keep digging into his business, every mistake, every shortcut. We'll bury them in evidence." He slid the property agreement into a folder, its weight a promise of justice. "You're not just fighting for your house, Norman. You're fighting for your life." I stood, my chair scraping softly, and took the folder. The bookshelves loomed behind James, their spines a reminder of the battles fought in these pages. I'd been a consultant, a planner, a father who gave too much. Now I was a fighter, and I wouldn't stop. "Let's do this," I said, my voice solid, like the ground I was reclaiming. James rose, shaking my hand, his grip firm. "I'll call you with updates," he said. "Stay sharp, Norman. They're rattled, and that makes them dangerous." The office's silence settled around us, a calm before the storm. I stepped outside, the folder heavy in my hands, the spring air cool against my face. Across the street, a bank sign glinted in the sunlight, its letters bold and unyielding. My eyes narrowed, a plan sparking in my mind. I tucked the folder under my arm and crossed the road, my steps purposeful, the bank's doors looming closer. The bank's marble floors gleamed under the spring light, their polish reflecting the hushed efficiency of the place. I stepped inside, James's legal folder tucked under my arm, its weight a steadying force. The air was cool, laced with the faint hum of a printer and the murmur of tellers. Tall windows let in a warm glow, but the sterile atmosphere tightened my chest. I approached the counter, my jacket straightened, a small act of reclaiming dignity, and asked for a private meeting. A banker, her tie crisp and her name tag reading Ms. Larson, led me to a glass-walled office. I sat, the chair's fabric stiff, and set the folder on the desk. "I need to confirm ownership of my property," I said, my voice calm but firm, "and check for any irregularities." My fingers smoothed the folder's edge, a nervous habit, but my eyes held hers. Ms. Larson nodded, her fingers flying over a keyboard, the screen's glow illuminating her face. "Address?" she asked, her tone professional but warm. I gave it, my home, the one I'd built with Ellen, now a battleground. The printer whirred, spitting out records, and she slid them across the desk. "You're listed as the sole owner, Mr. Green," she said, her voice steady. "No liens, no co-owners. The deed's clean." I exhaled, relief flooding me, but I wasn't done. "There's more," I said, leaning forward. "My son, Gregory Green. He's been using the house in his business dealings. I need to know how." My pulse quickened, the marble floor's cold sheen reminding me of Gregory's startup office, its lavish decor funded by my sacrifices. I'd poured my savings into his dreams, and now I suspected he'd crossed a line. Ms. Larson's fingers paused, her glasses catching the light. Let me check, she said, her voice cautious. She typed again, her brow furrowing as new records appeared. This is concerning, she said, her tone cautious. Records show loans were taken against the property, 3 of them totaling over $200,000. They're recent, but I'll need to verify the authorization. Can you confirm if you approve these? My stomach dropped, the room's silence amplifying the revelation. No, I said, my voice low, hard. I didn't know. Gregory's greed had always been there, but this, using my home as collateral, was a betrayal deeper than I'd imagined. The banker slid the loan documents across the desk, their pages neat but heavy with his deception. I scanned them, my fingers tracing the dates. Last year, when I was still living there, trusting him. A memory hit. Gregory in my study, asking about the deed, his smile too smooth. I'd thought he was curious, not scheming. Can I get copies? I asked, my voice steady despite the rage simmering inside. And what's the process to void these? I'll need a formal request to release the documents, she said. But I can start the process to flag these loans for review. As the sole owner, you'd have grounds to challenge them if they're unauthorized. Ms. Larson nodded, her expression sympathetic but professional. You'll need legal action to void them, she said, printing the copies. But as the sole owner, you have grounds. These loans are fraudulent if you didn't consent. The printer's whir filled the office, a mechanical pulse matching my quickening thoughts. I took the copies, their edges sharp, and tucked them into the folder. This was ammunition. Gregory's mistake, now in my hands. Thank you, I said, standing, my hands steady despite the storm inside. I kept my broader plan close, even from her. James would know what to do with these, but I had another angle, something to push Gregory's business to the brink. I'd been a consultant long enough to know where to press, and I wasn't done. I left the bank, clutching the documents. In my wallet, I found Tommy's old drawing, a crayon sketch of our house. My chest tightened, a flicker of doubt creeping in. Was I going too far? I shook it off, tucking the drawing back, and slipped the loan documents into my jacket. The fight wasn't over, but I was winning. I turned down the sidewalk, Tommy's drawing a quiet weight in my pocket, urging me to keep going. I walked back to the motel, the folder of loan documents heavy in my hand, my mind buzzing with the uncovered truth. Gregory's fraud was bigger than I'd imagined, and I felt anger mixing with triumph. In my room, I tossed the folder on the desk, sat down to gather my thoughts, when my phone buzzed, Gregory's name flashing on the screen. The motel room's neon buzz grated on my nerves, a constant drone that matched the tension coiling in my chest. I sat at the desk, the loan documents from the bank spread out like a map of Gregory's betrayal. Their stark numbers, $200,000 unauthorized, stared back at me, proof of his greed. My phone buzzed, Gregory's name flashing on the screen, and I braced myself. The air was stale, the room's walls closing in, but I answered, my voice calm, controlled. Dad, you've gone too far, Gregory hissed, his words sharp, desperate. You're ruining our lives, Stacy's, Tommy's, mine. Stop this, or you'll lose more than the house. His threat was a blade, meant to cut deep, but I heard the panic beneath it, the unraveling of a man out of moves. I leaned back, the chair creaking, my fingers tight around the phone. You brought this on yourself, I said, my tone even, cutting. You used my home for your loans, Gregory, without my consent. That's not just greed, it's fraud. I paused, letting the silence stretch, heavy with his guilt. Back off, or I'll make sure everyone knows. He spluttered, his voice rising. You're bluffing. Stacy's got a lawyer. We'll bury you in court. The call cut off, his rage echoing in the motel's oppressive hush. I set the phone down, my pulse steady but my mind racing. Stacy's hand was clear in his threats, her cunning weaving a net of lies. But I wasn't the one trapped. I stood needing air and noticed a folded paper by the door, slipped under while I was distracted. My heart skipped as I picked it up, the crinkled edge soft under my fingers. Tommy's handwriting, childish but careful, covered the page. I sank onto the bed, the mattress sagging, and read, Dear Grandpa, I'm sorry about the suitcase. I didn't want to. Mom and Dad said it was best, but I miss you. Please fix things. Love, Tommy. My throat tightened, his scrawled sorry blurring in my vision. I stepped outside, the evening sky a soft purple, the dusk air cool against my face. The motel's neon buzz faded, replaced by the faint chirp of crickets. I reread the letter under a street lamp, its glow catching Tommy's wobbly letters. A memory hit, camping with him, his small hand in mine as we watched the stars. He was caught in his parents' web, his loyalty torn, and now he was reaching out. My chest ached, doubt creeping in. Was I hurting him to punish them? I folded the letter, its edges worn, and tucked it into my pocket. Tommy's words were a weight, but they didn't change the truth. Gregory and Stacy had to face their actions. I'd fight, but I'd protect him, carve a path that spared his heart. The dusk sky deepened, a star blinking through the haze, and I felt Ellen's presence, her strength urging me on. I wasn't just fighting for the house anymore. It was for Tommy, for the family we'd built. My resolve hardened, the letter a quiet fire in my pocket. Gregory's threats were noise, but Tommy's plea was truth. I pulled out my phone, dialing James, my thumb steady despite the emotions swirling inside. A car horn blared nearby, sharp and urgent, snapping me to action. "James," I said when he answered, my voice firm. "We need to move now. They're desperate, and I've got something they can't ignore." The horn faded, but my focus didn't. The fight ahead clear as the star above. The spring sunlight sliced through the blinds of James Cook's law office, casting sharp lines across the coffee-stained desk. I sat across from him, my hands steady as I signed the fraud lawsuit against Gregory, the pen's ink smudging slightly under my grip. The office was a maze of files and legal books, their weighty presence a reminder of the battle we were waging. The rustle of papers filled the air, each sheet a piece of Gregory's undoing, those unauthorized loans, his reckless gamble with my home. I felt a surge of control, the kind I hadn't known since the night I left. James stamped the final document, his eyes glinting with satisfaction. "This is it, Norman," he said, his voice firm, almost celebratory. "Gregory's startup will be under a microscope now. Those loans? Fraudulent. His investors will tear him apart." He leaned back, the chair creaking, and folded his hands. "You've got him cornered." I nodded, a faint smile tugging at my lips. "He thought he could erase me?" I said, my voice low but solid. "But he forgot who taught him to play the game." The folder of lawsuit papers sat between us, crisp and heavy, a symbol of justice I'd earned. A memory flickered. Gregory at my desk years ago, my hand guiding his through budget sheets, believing in his dreams. Now those dreams were his noose. "We're filing today," James said, stacking the papers. "The court will notify him soon, but it may take weeks to resolve. Still, Stacy's defamation threats are smoke. She's got no ground to stand on." His tone was confident, but he paused, studying me. "You're holding up, Norman. Stronger than most would." I exhaled, the office's coffee aroma grounding me. "I have to," I said. "For Ellen, for Tommy." My grandson's letter, tucked in my pocket, was a quiet weight, a reminder of the cost of this fight. I stood, the chair scraping softly, and shook James's hand. "Let's finish this," I said, my voice steady, carrying the resolve I'd built over weeks. Back at the motel, the neon sign buzzed, its red glow flickering through the curtains. I sat on the bed, the lawsuit papers spread before me, their words a map of my victory. The room felt smaller, the air stale, but my mind was clear. My phone rang, a Westport number I didn't recognize, and I answered, expecting James with an update. "Norman, it's Linda from down the street," came a hushed voice tinged with concern. "I had to call. I saw Stacy at the charity gala last night." She looked shaken. People were whispering about Gregory's business troubles, something about debts. "She left early, clearly upset. I thought you should know." I leaned back, the mattress sagging, a quiet satisfaction settling in. "I'm just taking back what's mine," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I pictured Stacy's cold nod at that dinner, her necklace glinting as she sealed my expulsion. Now her perfect world was crumbling, her status shattered like glass. A part of me savored it, but Tommy's letter burned in my pocket. Was this hurting him too? "Thanks for letting me know, Linda," I said, ending the call. The motel's silence was heavy, broken only by the neon's hum. I stood pacing the small room, my shoes scuffing the carpet. Stacy's fall was justice, but it wasn't the end. Gregory was still out there, flailing, and I needed to be ready for his next move. I glanced at Ellen's photo on the nightstand, her smile a steady anchor. "We're almost there," I whispered, my fingers brushing the frame. A sharp knock at the door jolted me, my heart racing. I froze. The lawsuit papers still spread on the desk, their edges curling in the dim light. Who was here? Gregory? Stacy? Or someone else entirely? I crossed the room, my steps deliberate, and reached for the handle. The neons buzzed loud in my ears. I opened the motel door cautiously, my pulse racing, but it was James, his face alight with triumph. He held the court's final notice, my ownership confirmed, Gregory's fraud exposed, their threats nullified. Time to go home, Norman, he said, his voice firm. I gathered my things, the suitcase lighter now, and we drove to Westport. The front door of my home creaked as I pushed it open, the familiar sound hitting me like a wave of memory. The dining room stretched before me, its oak table gleaming under the spring evening's golden light, family photos lining the walls. The faint scent of Ellen's old lavender candles lingered, wrapping me in a warmth I hadn't felt since that awful dinner. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, the deed to the house heavy in my hand, its paper crisp with legal truth. Gregory and Stacy stood by the table, their faces pale, Tommy hovering behind them, his eyes wide. This is my home, I said, my voice firm, echoing in the quiet room. I set the deed on the table, its weight silencing their protests before they could start. Gregory's shoulders slumped, his usual bluster gone, while Stacy's hands trembled, her necklace still but her composure cracked. I'd come straight from the motel, the knock on my door revealing James with the court's final notice. Gregory's fraud exposed, their threats nullified. After weeks of legal battles, the court had issued a preliminary ruling in my favor, exposing Gregory's fraud and nullifying their threats, paving the way for my return. Dad, Gregory started, his voice tense. You can't do this. We've got a lawyer. We'll fight this. Stacy stepped forward, her eyes flashing. You think you can just walk in and take everything? But her voice wavered, and I saw the cracks. James's lawsuit, the investors pulling out, the neighbors' whispers had cornered them. I shook my head, my gaze steady. Best for you, I said, my tone sharp but controlled. You used my house for loans, Gregory. Lied to investors, to neighbors. You tried to erase me. The table's scratches caught my eye, a map of family dinners with Ellen, now a battlefield. I stood taller, the deed a shield. You're leaving. Tonight. Stacy stepped forward, her voice shaking. Norman, please, she said, her usual venom replaced by desperation. Let us stay. We'll make it right. For Tommy's sake. Her hands clasped together, knuckles white, but I saw through her status gone, her plans in ruins. The neighbor's call echoed in my mind, Stacy, red-faced, fleeing the gala. I turned to Tommy, his small frame half hidden behind the table. His eyes were wet, his hands fidgeting. Tommy, I said softly, kneeling to his level, come here. He hesitated, then ran to me, his arms wrapping around my neck. Don't hate me, Grandpa, he whispered, his voice breaking. My throat tightened, his warmth a reminder of why I'd fought, not just for the house, but for him. I could never hate you, I said, hugging him back, my voice low, steady. You'll always have a place here. I stood, facing Gregory and Stacy, my resolve unshaken. Take your things. The court's on my side. You're done here. Gregory's face crumpled, but he nodded, grabbing a suitcase. Ironic, I thought, remembering mine. Stacy gathered her purse, her movements jerky, her eyes avoiding mine. They shuffled toward the door, the silence heavy, broken only by the creak of floorboards. Tommy lingered, his hand brushing mine, and I squeezed it gently. I'll call you, kid, I promised, my voice soft but sure. The door closed behind them, the sound final, like a book shutting. I stood alone in the dining room, the lavender scent stronger now, Ellen's presence all around me. I ran my hand over the table, its familiar grooves grounding me. I'd won, reclaimed what was mine, but Tommy's hug lingered, a quiet ache in my victory. I reached into my wallet, pulling out Ray's old business card, its edges worn but warm. A faint smile crossed my face as I tucked it back, my fingers brushing Tommy's drawing beside it. I sat at the table, the house mine again, and dialed a number, the line ringing softly in the quiet night. In the Westport bar, I joined Ray and James in a corner booth, their grins welcoming. The weight of the past weeks felt lighter. I slid into the booth, the leather cool against my jeans, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "To Norman," Ray said, raising his beer, the froth catching the light. "The man who took back what's his." His gravelly voice was warm, his cap tilted back, and I couldn't help but laugh. The sound foreign but welcome. James clinked his glass against mine, his eyes bright. "You didn't just win, Norman," he said, his tone proud, almost paternal. "You took them down with their own game. That lawsuit, masterful." He leaned forward, the table's polished surface reflecting his grin. "You're a fighter, my friend." I raised my glass, the beer's cold bite sharp on my tongue. "To you both," I said, my voice warm, steady. "Ray, that taxi ride changed everything. And James, you gave me the tools to win." The bar's jazz swelled, a saxophone riff that reminded me of Ellen's old records, her laughter filling our home. I'd fought for her memory, for Tommy, for me. Ray chuckled, clapping my shoulder. "Told you that beer was on you, Norman," he said, his eyes crinkling. "Knew you had it in you the moment you got in my cab, soaked and stubborn." His humor cut through the weight of the memory. That rainy night, my suitcase heavy, his card a lifeline. "Stubborn's one word for it," I said, grinning. I leaned back, the booth creaking, and thought of the dining room I'd reclaimed, the deed on the table, Tommy's hug. "It wasn't just the house," I said, my voice softening. "It was proving they couldn't break me. But Tommy—" I paused, the bar's noise fading for a moment. "I want to rebuild with him, keep him close." James nodded, his glass pausing midair. "You will," he said, his voice gentle but sure. "He's a good kid, caught in their mess. You've got time now, Norman. Use it." His words settled over me, a quiet permission to look forward, not back. The bar's warmth wrapped around us, glasses clinking as we traded stories. Ray recounted his own fight for his shop, his voice gruff but fond, while James described the moment he knew the lawsuit would crush Gregory's schemes. Laughter spilled out, easy and real, and I felt something new, freedom, not just from the fight, but to be the man I was meant to be. I insisted on paying the tab, sliding cash across the counter. "This one's on me," I said, my tone firm but warm. Ray protested, but James just laughed, raising his glass again. "Next time, we're at my place," I said, the words a promise. The bar's jazz softened, a piano note lingering, and I saw Ellen's smile in my mind, her pride anchoring me. We stepped outside, the night breeze cool against my face, stars blinking through the spring sky. Ray clapped my shoulder again, James gave a nod, and we parted with plans to meet again. I walked down the street, my steps light, the breeze carrying the scent of blooming lilacs. The fight was over, my home mine, and Tommy's future a door I'd keep open. I tucked my hands in my pockets, Ray's card still there, and smiled, the night stretching wide before me. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching. Bye.